leaders listening to this, if you are the type of person that when you get asked a question that you don't know the answer to, you get insecure, let go of that. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. That's the best answer you could give. I don't know, but I'll find out for you. Or let's find out together. That's good leadership. And if you do know the answer, great. Give them the answer that you do know.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone who wants to learn, I think we have to remember that being challenged is not a bad thing. In fact, it can support your ideology. And if it doesn't, it convinces you that you're wrong. And again, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. It's just another opportunity to take some time to yourself and learn.
Welcome, everybody, to the Valley of the Heroic podcast. I wanted to say good morning because currently, right now, it is 6:36 in the morning for me. This is my earliest podcast recording. So you're probably going to hear me trip over a lot of words because my brain, I don't know if it's fully running yet. But this is like dad life 100%, bro. You have responsibilities, work responsibilities, baby responsibilities, family, and all of that. And so we've got two dads on the podcast today, me and my friend Salomon. Do you prefer Sal now, or Salomon is still good?
I think people just prefer to call me Sal. For some reason, Salomon is difficult for people to say, so just call me Sal.
Wow.
Or bro.
What a hard name.
Yeah.
Bro or bruh.
Yeah. But if Christian
and
the King Salomon, so you should, but whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, most of us know how to say the name. So I'm here with my friend Salomon because that's how I've known him. I've known him since fourth grade.
Third grade.
And third grade, right. I forgot about that. Yeah. Wow, we both migrated from the same school back to our fourth grade school, which was an interesting time, super interesting time. And we're here today. We're going to talk a little bit about Salomons Story and jump into some interesting topics, I think. Most of all, the most interesting thing to me about it is just him and his story and his heart and where he is currently in his life journey. And I really invite you guys to listen to it and hear his heart. But first of all, let's just start off with an introduction, man. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us what you're about.
Yeah, for sure. Let me begin by thanking you for this opportunity and privilege. I think it's very kind of you to give me a moment of everyone's time to share my experience. So, hi everyone. It's Salomon or Sal, whatever you feel comfortable, or hey yo, you. It's all good. So I'm married. I have a son, and pretty much just interested in history, American history, as you can see in the background. I'm interested in religion. I'm interested in just current events and just getting other people's perspectives. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome, bro. So tell me a little bit about, so I reached out to you because I wanted to have you on the podcast. Yeah. And do you remember the first question that you asked me when I hit you up about being on the pod?
Yeah. If I remember correctly, it was something like, "Are you sure?" Like something to that effect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he said, "Listen, are you sure? Because I am an agnostic, and so if you want me to be on your podcast, I know your podcast is predominantly a Christian podcast, and it is, right?
Yeah.
And Salomon is an agnostic. And so if you don't know what an agnostic is, how could you explain what an agnostic is for those who are not aware of what that word means?
Yeah, for sure. So agnosticism, or being agnostic, I think it's overall, it should be referred to having some space of doubt, some space of not knowing and admitting that, and feeling comfortable with that. So that's where I'm at. That's why I use the word agnostic. There are people who refer to like atheism agnostic, which is like something to the effect of, I know for sure there's nothing out there. And then there's a term where atheism is like, I know for sure, and you are wrong, I don't know either. So there are, I think, Professor Richard Dawkins referred about 7 levels of beliefs, and I'm right there where it's like in the middle where I don't know, and it's okay for me not to know. I'll hear you out.
Yeah.
I'll make my own opinion about it, and if presented with with facts, then I can make my own judgment.
Yeah. Yeah, bro. Thank you for that definition. And this is not where you were always. Like you grew up as a Christian,
Oh yeah,
right? And oh yeah, 1 in 9 church, right?
yeah. Right. 1 in 9. Yeah.
Yeah. So you grew up a Christian, you grew up in the faith, right?
Yeah.
Take me through a little bit of your story, because we haven't had the time to sit down and talk about this. So I am hearing this firsthand, and I'd love to just hear like what was it like for you, mostly growing up in the church? What was that experience for you? And then later on, we could kind of go into the transition for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think my experience to an extent might not be too unique. So there may be some of your audience members that can relate to it. And hopefully my experience can be used from like a therapeutic perspective. And I think that may be my overall goal in sharing my experience with you, to be honest.
Yeah.
So born and raised in New Jersey, went to
Jersey.
Yeah. We went to, I was a Christian before I was born. So let's see. My mom, my dad were both Christians. And we went to the 1 in 9 church in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and went to that church for about the first 18 years of my life. Unfortunately, there was to put it nicely, a theological differences in that church, and my mom decided to leave the church. We then went to a smaller church with a former church member of the first church that I went to. Said church many times, and he became the pastor. And pretty much at that point, I think that's where I became a true Christian. I was in my early 20s. There was a thirst to seek for God. This pastor, I would gladly admit, became my spiritual father. I learned a lot, right? At some point in the new church, I joined the ministry. I played the piano. I'm not the best piano player, but I do know how to play the chords, and that sufficed at the time. So I enjoyed my time there. I was spiritually raised. I'd say I was spiritually raised in that church. Enjoyed my time being a member there. Did about 2 or 3, like, let's say, lessons for the youth. And everything was fine. But I think in my early adult, when I was a young adult, as if I'm not, but in our early 20s, I was, there was an interest in apologetics, right? But so a Christian defending their theology, pretty much. So that pushed me into debates, into YouTube and finding debates. I'm a fan of debates. I'm a fan of having a platform to share opinions and ideas and kind of getting your thoughts. So, which is why I appreciate this podcast. So I Googled like a Christian versus Muslim debate, and I think that's where I just went forehead to leading to my spiritual change. I don't know if you want me to continue, or do you have any questions to that point? Because this is a long story.
No, bro, keep going. It's your story.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, for sure. Thank you. So, I heard this Christian debate, this Christian apologetic versus a Muslim Islam apologetic, and the individual defending Islam made a reference to 9/11. So this was in the early 2000s. Unfortunately, I can't find the YouTube video anymore. But I was paying attention to it, and he challenged the Christian apologetic with comparison between 9/11 and Samson. I had never heard of this before. So the challenge was the following. So apparently Samson was captured after Delilah, pretty much, I believe it was Delilah, ruined his life. Samson lost his strength. Samson was chained to two pillars where there were about 3,000 of Israel's enemies. I can't remember if it's the Philistines or whatever. Um, Samson
It
looks
was
to
the
the
Philistines.
Philistines, right? Thank you. Samson looks to the sky or the roof of the building where they're at, and pleads to God to give him strength so he can pull on the two pillars. So it seems like the two pillars were, I guess, foundational pillars because God granted his wish and gave him the strength. Samson pulled the two pillars down, and the building crumbled. So the Islam challenge was that the comparison of this one individual, Samson, taking out 3,000, almost like a suicide bomber, to 9/11. Now, I
Mm.
had never heard that. I'm not too sure if people have made that connection. In all fairness, I think it's an excellent challenge to someone that is defending Christianity. So I went to my pastor and I said, Pastor, this is what I heard. I found this video. This is what I heard. Like, pretty much, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
So, first off, I think it's appropriate for the sheep to ask the pastor things.
100. Okay. 100. We're going to stop
Yeah.
there. Because at least as far as maybe from, okay, so my experience in being a leader has been with a lot of people, right? And a lot of people ask me questions, and I've taken it upon myself to be a well prepared teacher. Am I the most prepared? Absolutely not. But especially growing up when I was teaching small groups and stuff like that,
Yeah.
I got into apologetics in my teenage years and read apologetics books and read a lot of articles and videos and stuff like that. And so to me, it was also important to understand theology, apologetics, doctrine, all of those things to understand other world religions as well.
Yeah.
And my encounter with people was mostly Christians or Catholics or former Catholics who are now Protestant. And in the Christian church and in the Catholic church, which they're all Christian, but just to differentiate, um, there is that problem. I've seen it more so with Catholic churches that they're a little bit more resistant to questions. It's like you need to have blind faith. Um, or if you're questioning, you are in the wrong. And really, what I've noticed is that what I've noticed is that as human beings, one of the biggest things that happens is that when somebody asks you a question that you do not know the answer, it takes a very confident and secure person to say, I don't know. Most people, what they do is they get defensive and they try to turn it on you to make you wrong for having asked the question. And there is nothing wrong with asking a question. So, to leaders listening to this, if you are the type of person that when you get asked a question that you don't know the answer to, you get insecure, let go of that. There is nothing wrong with saying, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. That's the best answer you could give. I don't know, but I'll find out for you. Or let's find out together. That's good leadership. And if you do know the answer, great. Give them the answer that you do know. Have a conversation. There's nothing wrong with that. And for those of you who are in not just churches, but in any community where you're with a group of people going towards a common goal at your workplaces, there is nothing wrong with asking a question for clarification, for understanding, for growth, and don't let anybody make you feel like it is after you do ask a question. So I just wanted to say that real quick because that was a very good point. It is 100% true, bro. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone who wants to learn, I think we have to remember that being challenged is not a bad thing. In fact, it can support your ideology. And if it doesn't, it convinces you that you're wrong. And again, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. It's just another opportunity to take some time to yourself and learn. And so I asked my pastor that, and he got a little hesitant, was respectful, and said you shouldn't be looking at those things. So I was raised in a Christianity where it was so I'll have to pause to kind of explain where I was at. So we were raised as literalists, right? Meaning that the word of God was exactly how it was. If it took 6 days, then it took 6 days. If it was the resurrection of Jesus, it was like a physical resurrection and so forth. So we were very involved in that theology and so forth. So that was my foundation. And with that being said, we weren't allowed to ask questions. What the pastor said is what the pastor said. You don't question your parents, right? Honor your father or your mother so your days can be long and so forth. If you don't, 3 or 4 of your generations could be, they can be challenged. So that's how I was raised. So just taking that step towards asking the pastor that question, first of all, confirms how comfortable I was with him and how respectful he was.
Yeah.
But also, starts to shake the foundation of my childhood and the way I was raised in Christianity. So he said that, and I was a little concerned because I guess at that time I believed that the Bible can defend itself. It can stand on its own. That's why, according to the way I was raised, one verse can defend another verse, and one ideology can confirm another ideology in the Bible. But unfortunately, he just didn't want to be involved. But I continued. I continued that. It sort of led to atheists versus a Christian. And each time I got more involved in these videos, it was more like, it's you can have the most intelligent, most articulate Christian in these videos, and they sort of, with all due respect, they sort of fall short to logic, and that's where I found myself. So that pushes me. I must have asked that pastor that question maybe in about 2011. So that led me to have an internal doubt, seeking for knowledge and seeking advice. And I think I created my own bubble, meaning I immersed myself into people's ideology, not too much into like Eastern ideologies, Eastern religious ideologies, but more, more like what here in the States we see the most, Catholicism, Islam, Christianity, the 3 Judeo religions. So it got to the point where I came across a book. This is the book. So it's called The Christian Agnostic. So this is written by a reverend in England during World War II, around that time. And it was the first time I heard the term Christian agnostic. And I was like, okay, so I know what agnosticism is. I know what Christianity is, but what is to be a Christian agnostic? So I'd like to read just like a sentence or two that defines what it is. So Reverend Weatherhead says the following: I am writing for the quote Christian agnostic, by which I mean a person who, though he is sure of many Christian truths, feels that he cannot honestly or conscientiously, quote, sign on the dotted line that he believes certain theological ideas about what some branches of church dogmatize. So in reading this book, he shares perspectives of like how he can believe in Christianity, but not absorb the most of its, for lack of a better way of saying it, like supernatural things.
Mm,
He can believe in the prophecy of Jesus or the theology of Jesus and be okay with not believing that he came from a virgin mother.
mm,
He can believe that. He can believe that Jesus um, didn't need to rise from the dead to still bring, the scripture to the world. So I labeled myself as a Christian agnostic, and there's more to that, right? Just reading that book and absorbing, being involved in like a social media community that believe that same ideology. So I went from being a Christian to a Christian agnostic, and in that phase of my life, I was like, I don't believe the Old Testament. It's a bit too. Um, it's not sufficient enough for me to believe it at that time. All I can focus is on Jesus, because
mm.
there's nothing greater to turn the other cheek after you've been smacked. There's nothing greater than walking the extra mile for your brother. So I dived into that, and I just found myself at the beginning being okay with that, but there was still something odd about that, which then led me to immerse myself into um, like religious history, let's say, and some sort of science and so forth. So and that's where I'm at right now. It's been like almost like 2 years where I'm like, you know what, I don't believe everything in the Bible. There are ideologies that are applicable to my life, to everyone. Um, I don't think in my life I need the theology behind it. It's a fantastic book from a literature perspective, but to me it doesn't stand on its own as a scripture, as a guidance as it is for many people. So that's where I'm at right now. I feel comfortable in in not knowing what's next. I have my own perspectives, and you're more than welcome to ask me what I think. Other than that, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, awesome, bro.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for taking me through that.
yeah, for sure.
Because you just laid that out very well, and and I see the both the logic and the heart behind your journey. It's clear to me that your heart is for truth, and at the end of the day, you're trying to find what's true, and you care about that deeply, and that's evidenced by your diligence in trying to seek out truth and understand it, and do so in a way that honors truth itself, right? Um, and doesn't just take things at face value, or just like, oh, because um, el pastor me dijo, the pastor told me that this is what I need to believe. And I think that everybody can learn from that. You have to be able to, and this is more for the audience members, but it's something that both of us hold clearly, based on what you said, but also a belief that I hold as well, that you have to be able to explain, or to be able to firmly hold the beliefs that you have, right? And if you can't do that, right, if it's enough for you what you have received, that's fine. However, um, if somebody has questions and you're unable to answer them, one, you shouldn't become frustrated in that moment with that person because of them being in their journey where they're at. Excuse me. And number two, wouldn't you want to be the person to be able to give an answer that is satisfying, that is robust enough to be able to to honor what you believe. Because if you believe it, like if it's a true core belief to you, then you should make it defendable for you. And whatever that could mean, different things to different people. But I just firmly believe that we need to be able to hold our, we need to both be able to hold our beliefs not so closely, because we can't know everything. We're not capable of that, right? But also at the same time, we should be able to hold them firmly in the sense that we're convinced and we're firm in the beliefs that we have. So I commend you for that, bro, and I hope that everybody can take that as a lesson for themselves to then be able to hold their beliefs more firmly, with conviction and with some thought to back it up. You know,
Yeah.
um, through this journey, bro, I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying, and um, I have a couple of friends who are in a similar camp to you. I have a friend who is he's a straight atheist, never was Christian, um, and that's my boy. Like we ride it. Like I'd ride for that dude,
Yeah.
and we talk about religion here and there. And one of the things that just came up to me as I was hearing you, I was gonna make a joke and say, "Well, well, I want you to know that I'm praying for you, right?" But while that's funny, also at the same time, this friend of mine who is an atheist said to me one day, um, I can't remember the context of what he said it to me in. Um, I think that he was going through like a little bit of a rough day or a rough little season or something like that. And I said to him something along the lines of, I would tell you that I'm praying for you, but I don't want to um, upset you because I know that you don't believe in that. And he said to me, well, while while I'm an atheist, um, the fact of the matter is that I know that prayer is love. Praying for somebody is an act of love. And that marked me. So I will tell you that I will continue to pray for you in your journey, right? And I'll say that to you as an act of love, right? Um, Praying that you will continue on this journey and that you would find truth and that it would just assault you and be with you and you would be firm in your beliefs. But also at the same time, I have other friends who were in the church and who are in similar journeys of that you are, have gone through deconstruction. Some people are in a place where they don't know if they have faith anymore. Some people have abandoned their faith and they do so in a sometimes violent way, because they went through traumatic experiences for so many years. The only way they knew how to let go was to do it violently and to just like completely abandon any type of reason. It's not about reason at that point. At that point, it's about survival. um, and so many people are going through different stories, and I think there's going to be people that are listening. And you said that one of your goals is for it to be a therapeutic thing. So I'm curious, bro, what were some of the emotions that came up for you throughout this journey? Because this is a faith that you held, like you said, you were Christian before you were born, right? And it's like this is something you were born into, and that's a lot of people's reality, right? That's something that you hold on to for so long, and you have so many memories and experiences, many of them good, some of them not so good. And it's like, that can be a very emotional thing. And we've kind of touched on the rational side of things,
Yeah.
but talk to me a little bit about what emotions came up for you or are coming up for you in the journey.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, your friend who is atheist has a very, I'm going to say, like a pure perspective on what it is for someone to say, I will pray for you. I think I share that perspective. Aside from it, knowing that if Eric says, Sal, I will pray for you, I know that intention comes from an innocent, let's say, pure, that almost that, almost how you say, like that Philadelphia love that you're supposed to have,
Yeah.
right? Um, but I'm also aware that that's part of the public's lexicon vernacular. It's just,
Yeah.
like someone sneezes, I could say God bless you. And
Yeah.
it's not because I mean I believe in God, nor does that person believe in
Yeah.
God. It's just part of the way we speak, So
Absolutely.
I don't mind someone believing that their goal in their life may be to pray for those that are non-religious. That's absolutely fine, because overall, I'm going to believe it's from a good perspective. So I applaud your friend there. That's beautiful. Um, so there are people who get to the point of deconstructing and sort of, let's say, vilify the church, right?
Yeah.
And to an extent, that's a fair thing to do. That is very fair. Sometimes you'd have to put a face or an organization and label them bad if it's part of the process of dealing with it, and I think that's a fair thing to do. My emotions and my emotional roller coaster may be on that path in the past. So I grew up in a church where it was very religious, very, if you don't pray before you eat, if you don't pray before going to sleep, if you don't pray in the morning, you're going to hell, right? So
Rajatabla.
yeah, exactly. So hell was utilized as from like discipline, pretty much. And so I'm gonna say that was the churches in the 90s. I'm not too sure how the churches are today. It seems to be a bit more of a less preaching of hell and more prosperity. I can be wrong. I'm not too sure. But at least in the 90s, the Left Behind series, the movies, everything. Yeah, everything.
Just brought it back.
Yeah, let's just say that media was well used to sort of create fear. And when I look back, I had beautiful experiences. Christian music is still something beautiful. It just is what it is. Without the Christian church, historically, we don't have these beautiful cathedrals, these work of arts, classical music, at least some songs. So, but the church in my childhood and the theology and the media and so forth was used to put us into shape, almost that spiritual whipping, pretty much. Hell was used a lot.
Weaponizing faith.
Yep, exactly. So hell was used a lot, and I think that there was this time that I blamed the church for using hell as a tool. There's this one film that in my childhood was used as a to discipline me, right? If I don't behave, I'm going to put this film, sort of thing. So this film depicted two individuals. One dies, this person goes to heaven, and the other person goes to hell. So it's an old film that as an adult I'm like, wow, that's just terrible makeup, terrible media creativity. But as a childhood where you're just too let's say you're malleable, right? You're sort of like that pot of clay that the Bible talks about, and these sources can kind of shape you into a certain way of believing. So seeing this film, and it was used as, like I said, a tool of discipline, really stayed in the back of my head. Nights where I couldn't go to sleep, sometimes let's say daydreaming and being in hell, and just creating images, like worse than, Dante's art. So that was used a lot in my childhood. So there was always this idea of like, this is what, like you presented it, more like the logical versus emotion, right? This is what I logically, the logical side of my head is telling me Like, are you sure? Does this make sense to you? Is this logical? And then the emotional side is more like, well, who cares what is logical? Think about the consequences. You know, if you don't believe in this, you'll go to hell. If you do believe in this, you go to heaven. You know, almost like made you, at least it made me believe that, I think you've heard of this Pascal's wager, right? Yeah.
Yes, but I can't remember what
So
it is.
something to the effect of like, you can make a wager, right? If you believe in God, you go to heaven, right? And if he's not
Right.
real, nothing happens. And so,
That's okay.
yeah,
It's
that's
like
okay.
nothing happens, so you're good.
Right. But you decide not to believe in God and it's real, you're screwed. But but if you don't believe in God and there's nothing, you're good. So it's pretty much picking the best conclusion. And for me, it's like at that time was more like, well, emotionally speaking, I just have to believe in this because I don't want to roll the dice and wake up in hell. So there is that, the best way of saying it, there is that trauma that individuals sort of, you sort of sleep through the trauma. And what I mean by that is that it's become so normalized. You know, it's okay for a child to be traumatized with these tools. It's okay to whoop them into shape. But for me, it got to the point where it's like you kind of zoom out, you know, look at life through like the line of a spectrum, and it's like, this is not it. You know, this was used negatively, and you don't do that to a child. So I believe I was able to work through that. You know, many times, you know, figuring things out where it's like, just because a room was dark doesn't mean the devil's present. Just because like, all right, this may sound silly, but just because you hear like a passing horn of a truck doesn't mean it's the last trumpet of Revelation. You see? So I went through all of that, you know, and it's a scary process, especially as a child, but addressing it as a young adult made it easier, you know. So I think it's fair to call it trauma, and I think it's fair for people who have dealt with it to find it as evil. I think that's fair. But at the end of the day, I accept it as a challenge in my childhood. It's led me to where I'm at. And now I don't see the church too much as a villain. I think people have pure intentions. I think overall people are good. But there are some biblical ideologies I just won't ever accept.
Yeah, bro. I appreciate that, man. And I think that you hit the nail on the head with like weaponizing faith. Actually, the day that we're recording this, my episode with Susan is going up, and we do talk a little bit about the Hispanic church and its proclivity with, especially in the 90s, like you were saying, with obedience, which was more, less obedience and more about control. And I share a little bit of my ideas or opinions about why some of those things happened. I think that's a lot of it is cultural. A lot of it is due to a lack of resources that we have as a people. Not very many Hispanic pastors have gone to seminary. It's, you know, the population of minorities in seminary is less than, man, I don't want to mess up this statistic. I don't remember what it is, so I'm not going to say anything. But I know that I know for sure the statistic of minority women is less than 1%, which is extremely sad. But either way, There's a lack of resources. There's a lack of understanding. We bring cultural things into the church. I think that there's a lot of fear, or there was a lot of fear in our approach to faith. And so we had to control ourselves and our members in the church. And we did so with tactics like scaring people out of hell and stuff like that, that I think that just wasn't really effective. It caused more harm than good. Some people were able to get out of that and find a healthier relationship with God. Some people, it led them in other directions. Either way, as human beings, we're constantly seeking both comfort and health in our lives. We don't always attain it, but we're trying to be in a healthy position as people. We're trying to be in a position where we're healthy as in our minds and our hearts and our bodies, and that we approach other people in healthy ways. And my heart is that the church would be able to find a way to honor stories like yours, right? Some people might be listening and they're like, why isn't he like defending the faith? And it's like, nah. You don't know me. That clearly you don't know me, because my objective here is like, it reminds me of when you first asked me, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. I don't care that this is a Christian podcast. I want you there because I want you to tell your story. I want people to hear your story. And if you're missing the things that you could learn from this story, then you're not paying attention, right? And I think that that's a big problem, not just in the church. It's a human problem where we don't really listen, right? Because if you're listening, there's so many rich things to take from this conversation, whether you're a Christian or you're an agnostic yourself listening. There's so many rich things to take from this. And I think principle among those things is the ability for us to have a conversation that is healthy, to hear each other's story, to hear each other's hearts, to honor each other's story and to honor each other's hearts, and to not feel the need at any point to impose our beliefs on one another. Right? I could sit here and tell you that my hope is that that God would present himself to you again and you would have a relationship with you because I'm still in the faith. Yes, that is a hope of mine, but it is not my responsibility. And in taking it as if it were my responsibility, I would do more harm than I would do good. Because imagine if you came on this call, bro, and the whole time I was just like telling you were wrong. Would you have been like, all right, bro, I'm out? Or would you have weathered the storm? You could be honest.
I'd be like, I think my baby's waking up. My son's waking up.
I hear my son in the other room. I'm gonna have to go, bro. But imagine, and people do that. Maybe they don't do it like on a podcast, but they do it every Sunday at church, or they do it when they meet people at their job. Like bro, you know that I was a boss in my former job, so I had employees, and I had employees who were Christians, and I had some employees sometimes throughout different seasons who would because we had Christians and non-Christians, and I had times where some of the Christians would come crazy and say crazy stuff to them, and I would be like, you can't say that, and then they would look at me like I wasn't Christian. But at the same time, it's because that's what they were being taught. And this wasn't that long ago. So a lot of this stuff still does exist. To your question, to your statement earlier about you're not sure if it's still like this. Maybe it has grown, but there's a lot of that stuff still there. And I think that we need to be able to be in a position where we can listen to one another and listen to one another genuinely. Like I said, my heart is that you would have a relationship with God again. However, it's not my responsibility. And so maybe I play a piece in that. But when I take it as if it were my responsibility, I'll start to do things that are more damaging than they are good. And I think that we do that. Like, I think people get a little excited. They have a lot of passion, fervor, and just like even joy, right? But it manifests in a way that's unhealthy. And we just need to have healthy relationships with people. And that's my heart, not just for Christians, but for humanity, that we would be able to look at one another, see our differences, and be able to say, I can love you. I can love you through these differences. I think that honors Jesus more than standing up for Jesus does.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to say something about what you mentioned. Well, first off, I am looking forward to Susan's conversation with you. It's been many years since
Yeah,
I've
bro.
seen her.
I think you'll enjoy it.
I also know Susan from the fourth grade because we were all
Yeah.
classmates. So shout out to her. Um,
Shout out to Sue.
yeah, and
She says Sue Boogie from the Wick.
Sue Boogie from the Wick, and shout out to everyone we went to school with. How about that?
Your word.
So,
yeah.
I think you raise an interesting point in identifying the Hispanic church. So I may start to swim in the ocean of areas that I'm not too familiar with, and I'm okay with being corrected, let's say, in this area. But just like the Black church, the Hispanic church may have to address its own trauma. And what I mean by that is the following. In the Hispanic church, and I've gone to about 3 or 4, so I'm just going to make a huge generalization here. Most of these pastors from the previous generation, they've fled nations where you don't question authority, you don't question government, right? So if you ask them, if they were to ask, let's say their mayor or their councilman or woman, well, probably men at that time, in those nations, you'd probably get shot, you'd probably get jailed.
Yeah.
So let's say that practice is pushed onto every area of life where you don't then ask, as children of that generation, you don't ask them questions because they themselves were raised in a time where you couldn't ask questions. And then that gets enforced, translated into Christianity, where it's like you can't ask your pastor questions, and you're wondering to yourself, well, aren't we supposed to test the spirits? Aren't we supposed to figure things out as a community? But maybe if you dissect it, and I guess this is also a call for empathy and sympathy towards your pastor, where it's like they come from a time where they themselves couldn't ask any questions. So I think as a whole, just like the Hispanic church may have to address that. And granted that generation is moving on, and say our generation is the one going on the pulpit and preaching, and there's more of a loving and welcoming perspective. But I think it might be fair to have that generation address that trauma. That's about it. I just wanted to point that out.
Bro, that's wow. What an observation. What an observation. And bro, I just want to say that a lot of people would not be capable of the nuance it takes to be able to see that. So thank you for that, bro.
You're welcome.
So, bro, I think that's a good place for us to put a comma here.
All right, for sure. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for this opportunity. Absolutely. This was fantastic.
Bro, listen, you're awesome. I want you to know that.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your heart, your diligence in sharing things with thought and with articulation, man. You're like just excellent, bro. I really appreciate that. And we're going to continue our conversations outside of the pod. Maybe you'll come back on the pod, but either way, I know that we'll continue, you and I, outside of here. So just know that.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever you want and time permitted, I'd be on. Thank you.
Of course, bro. Listen, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
So pretty much Instagram is the place where I go. I use the most. It's Salowolf, then the word wolf, Salo Wolf. I don't post anything that is personal. It's literally just historical quotes. So if you're into history, American history, mostly 20th century presidential history, then that may be a page that you may enjoy. Other than that, I'm not a photographer. I don't post anything. Sometimes I post newspapers I collect because I'm kind of nerdy like that. But yeah, you can send me a message there, and I'm more than welcome to chat with you and about religion or whatever else is in your mind.
Thanks again, bro. And for everybody listening, thank you so much for being here today. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode. Have a great day. See you guys next week. Peace.
Bye, everyone.